This lesson is on section 10.4 called triangles. Now a triangle is a figure with 3 sides and 3 angles. And this is our symbol for a triangle. And the sum of the measures of the angles of the triangle is 180 degrees. So you have to understand that the 3 angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So knowing this information brings us to our first example. Example 1 says find the value of x in the triangle A, B, and C. So if you know all 3 angles add up to 180 degrees, oh that's a real bad 8, 180 degrees, then all we have to do is we're going to add up the angles that we have. So we're going to say 66, so we're going to take this angle, and then we're going to add 52 to it. So I'm going to say 66 plus 52 is 118 degrees. So then I'm going to take 118 degrees and I'm going to subtract it from 180. So 180 minus 118, do the math here, is 62 degrees. So I know that the value of my missing angle x is 62 degrees. Again, how I figured out that missing angle is I added up the 2 angles that I was given right there. I was given 66 degrees and 52 degrees, and I got 118, and I know that all angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So I took 180 minus 118 to get 62 degrees. So we can also classify triangles by the sides the triangles have. So there's 3 types of triangles. There's an equilateral triangle, an isosceles triangle, and a scalene triangle. Now, if you see those tick marks on the first 2 triangles that I have here, the tick marks just indicate that the sides are the same. So if we look at the equilateral triangle, that means that all sides are the same length. Equilateral, all sides are the same length. If you look at that kind of that prefix equal, you can say all 3 sides are equal. They're the same length. Now isosceles triangles only have 2 sides that have the same length. If you look at the first letter of the word in isosceles is I. If you I tell my students, if you think about it, you have 2 eyes on your face, so you have 2 sides that are the same length. Now for scalene, if you notice there's no tick marks on that triangle, so that means all sides have different lengths. So a scalene triangle means that all sides have different lengths. Maybe an easy way to remember that is maybe scalene is a silly word, so maybe that's an abnormal triangle, so all sides have different lengths. The next way we can classify triangles are by its angles. So if you have a triangle that has one obtuse angle, and a triangle can only have one obtuse angle because all the angles add up to 180 degrees. So if you see that on a triangle, if it has one obtuse angle, then you can call it an obtuse triangle. If you have a triangle that has no obtuse angles, or they have 3 acute angles, you can call that triangle an acute triangle. So now we're going to take this idea of classifying triangles by its sides and classifying triangles by its angles, and then we're going to be able to classify triangles even further. So that brings us into our next example that says classify the triangle by its angles and sides. So I'm going to first classify it by its angle. And if I look at, 120 degrees, well, I know these are acute angles here. They're smaller than 90 degrees. So if I have an angle that's obtuse, then I'm going to call it an obtuse triangle. And now I'm going to classify it by its sides. Well, I see 2 sides. I see 2 tick marks. That means that 2 sides are the same length. And if I remember back, well, if 2 sides are the same length, then that's called an isosceles. Isosceles triangle. So I can classify this triangle as being obtuse isosceles triangle. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. And then in summary, in order to find the missing angle of a triangle, you just have to add up the angles that you're given and then subtract it from 180 degrees, because you know that all angles add up to 180 degrees in a triangle. And then you can classify triangles as either equilateral, isosceles, or scalene, depending on the sides that are equal, along with classifying them as either obtuse or acute, depending on if they have one obtuse angle or three acute angles. And that brings us to the end of the lesson. Thanks for watching.